You are now tuned in to Music, Men, and My Mental with your host, C. DeVone, tackling all things career, relationship, and your overall health.
Trifecta. Let's get to it. Let's start the show.
Okay, welcome to Music, Men, and My Mental. I am your host, DJ C. DeVone, and we are tapping to all things in your career, your relationships, and your overall health. Well, I'm so excited to start this project. You guys have no clue, and I have a special guest with me today.
Hi, I'm Tennesha.
Yes, we have Tennesha Wood from the DRL Podcast. That is the Dating, Relationships, and Love Podcast. Did I say it right?
Yep.
Okay,
cool.
cool.
You even say it like I do. I go dating, relationships, and love. So yeah, you even got the little twang on there.
Okay, good. So this podcast is all about your career, which for me is music, relationships, that's what the men stands for, and then mental. But I put that as your overall health, because if your mind is not right, then everything is
not right.
Yeah, you can look good, but your mind, you are just screwed, you know? So basically that's the whole premise of this podcast is to really, if we can balance these three things out, then maybe we can get somewhere. Maybe we can find a sense of some purpose, some happiness, or just being content, you know? So that's what this whole thing is about. But I wanted to dive into something that I find really hard, and that's just dating in a big city. So I call this, the topic is the dating nitty gritty in the big city, you know? So we're going to dive into lots of topics, dive into lots of questions, but first, let's talk about what your podcast is about and introduce yourself.
So again, I'm Tennesha Wood. I'm a dating coach and host of the podcast Dating, Relationships, and Love. And Dating, Relationships, and Love is really about all things dating in New York City. So I have a variety of guests come on. Crystal has also been on.
Yes.
And we talk about wherever they're at in their lives. So that might be a really interesting episode I had was a girl and her fiance who are in an open relationship. Another one was a divorcee who's talking about getting back out there. Another one is just somebody that's sick of swiping on Tinder. So it's just across the entire dating spectrum as a whole. And we generally talk about their story and then like dive into what they've learned or what they can do better next time.
How'd you even get into dating coaching? Like that's such a fabulous title. Like I'm a dating coach, or like you're like Hitch, like what? Do you hook people up?
I mean, a little of everything. So it really depends on what people need. So let me rewind. So I got into it because I was on this reality show. That was about #Black Love. That was basically like a black Sex in the City with like 5 black women. I was friends with 3 of them ahead of time. So, and the rest I was just meeting. But it was like a really strong female bond, and we were there for each other, and we were going through we were all at a different place. So I had just started seeing somebody new. One of the other women was going through a divorce. Well, 2 of the other women were going through a divorce. One was a little on the younger side and exploring her sexuality. One was dating interracially. So we were just at sort of all different places. And then we would have, we had a life coach and a therapist that were also would sort of talk us through the things that we were going through. And that was really part of what inspired me in terms of like the coaching. Like I really enjoyed that aspect.
That they were hooking you up with people.
Well, for me personally, they weren't, because I had just started a new relationship right before the show.
I've seen bits and pieces on the show. You were like running that guy through the mud.
Not gonna lie, we all have our issues. I have some control issues, so just a little something, no big deal.
But you're so good at it, though. Like a true person of power makes people feel like they are in control and they have a say so. But you're you're the boss.
Don't tell my boyfriend that. No.
Yes. Okay.
So that's how I got into it. And after the show, me and that guy that I was dating on the show broke up, and everybody was like, can you tell us what's going on? What's happening? And I was like, you know what? I'm just going to start a podcast and give you an update on everything.
So that, if you had to say why you guys broke up, what would you say?
I hate to throw anybody under the bus. Let me just say this. Though. everybody plays a role.
I love to throw people under the bus.
Like
so
everybody plays a role in the demise of a relationship, right? So it's never just he did this or I did this. So I would say he probably didn't know himself very well or what he wanted. I would say I didn't, I wasn't aware of those blind spots that he was having, like that he didn't know. I didn't know that till after the fact. I was like, oh, this came from like you not knowing yourself. And I wasn't observant enough and, you know, probably a little controlling too.
That's okay. So now we're just diving right into some of
let's
these
get into
topics because you said something and it's like not knowing yourself. And I mean, that is so crucial. Like, I don't even know if you should even start dating until you really have a sense of yourself, or at least like, okay, you know, which I'm going to go into some, you know, my points of, you know, this whole podcast is like to walk away with something that you can, you know, use in your daily life. And one of them is like downloading a person, you know, but also downloading yourself. Like this Word document doesn't open with this type of software because, you know, you haven't downloaded it correctly. You haven't downloaded the person to say like, you know, this person doesn't want a relationship. So, you know what? Why am I going to keep, you know, being around this person when I really want to be in a relationship? Right. So then you download that person, properly. Oh, they're talkative or they spend money or just whatever you have to profile people. You have to do it in your head so you can assess them. They have to do the same for you. But okay, so let's go into like dating 101 and like, let's just stick to New York City or a big city. Okay. You know, what would you say, like, let's just start. If you're saying, you know what, I want to start dating, what is like the first tips that you would say are? Step one, as you briefly touched on, you have to know yourself and what you want, right? So if I don't, and I'm just going out there, I'm throwing spaghetti at the wall. I'm just seeing what lands. It doesn't mean it's something good for me. I'm just like, I'll just see what's out here. And that's not a great idea when you're dating in a big city because there's a lot out there, but is it for you? Like you're essentially wasting your time. If you leave the house and you don't think to yourself, what do I want either in a partner or in a relationship or even out of this date? Like what are my intentions? What do I hope to leave with? You're kind of already failing at it, right? Ooh. Yeah. Okay. You know, because truly though, if you set the intention and you let that person know up front, it gives everybody the opportunity to get on the same page. And if they're not, you're not wasting your time. So if I go on a date. If you're scaring someone and you're like, you know, I want to be married in a year. Like, I mean, that's kind of pushing them away, making you sound a little crazy. Like, I don't know. Give me like some good intentions. Okay. Well, I wouldn't say it like that, even if that were my intention. I would probably say something like, you know, my goal is to really form a long-term relationship that can lead to marriage and eventually a family or whatever it is that you're looking for. I wouldn't necessarily be like, in 1 year exactly from today, I need to be walking down the aisle. But that would only, if that's your plan and that's your intention and you tell that person and that scares them, guess what? That's not your person. Absolutely. That's not your person. Any man that's like, oh, she was talking about marriage. She want to do this. She want to do that. Well, that's just not your person. And that's okay. Like rejection in dating is 100% okay. If somebody doesn't like what you want. Can you repeat that for the people in the back? Rejection in dating is 100% okay. Right. You're not going to make it work with everybody. And that's just how it is. And it's so funny. And I think as women, we take rejection so personal. You know, it's like, I'm not pretty enough or I wasn't smart enough or maybe he likes these type of girls over, you know, brown skin girls with blonde hair. Maybe he likes, you know, dark skin. You know, we start looking into all these different aspects. But the reality is like, it probably was the best thing that happened, like to be rejected from that particular person because they're just not for you or it just wasn't going to work even a month, 6 months down the line, you know? So I look at it like even like a job, like going into your career. Like you're going to get rejected from some job interviews because like maybe they just didn't like you or maybe they just didn't feel like you were qualified. But we look at qualifications of like, well, I'm so great. I'm so pretty. I've got all these degrees. I'm fabulous. But no, this wasn't the right fit for you. People got to feel you here. Like you could be perfect. The worst, have you ever been on a date where you went out with somebody who's like, he has this job, he does this, he has this car, he's funny, and everything that you could possibly want in a man, he had, but you just didn't. I was going to say we may know the person, so and I was like, wait, we're not naming any names, right? But you just didn't feel it, right? And you can't account. That's one thing. It's like
you cannot account for chemistry and what the heart wants. So you can't take that personally. Like you can't take it like, what didn't I have? It's just, was that person a fit for you? Did your hearts vibe?
Okay, so while we're there, we're jumping ahead of the gun because since I'm a person who likes to date, because I like to meet a lot of different personalities, I feel like I dated a lot of people so I can have this show, so I can give advice back to other people to say, listen, girl, I dated this guy for you. Don't do it. Or you know what? This is how you're going to have to move with this particular person. So for me, I'm into horoscopes. I'm a Sagittarius. I need to feel all the feels for me. If it don't feel good, I don't want to do it. Mm-hmm. Like, no matter what, it's a job, whether it's even going to the gym. I'm like, I hate the gym. Everyone thinks I'm like the fitness person. I like yoga. I like things that make me feel really good.
Right.
So for instance, when you are feeling good on this date and everything's going well, it's not even about all the qualifications anymore. It just feels good.
Exactly.
But the person's telling you, like, maybe they're not really into monogamy or marriage, or, you know, it just hasn't really worked for them. They haven't really seen it work. So, you know, maybe one day, but I don't know, you know, but you guys are vibing and it feels good. That's a New York City thing right now. I feel like it's actually an epidemic in New York City. Like, a lot of men are not now believing in relationships and marriage, and it's just so much fun going on that, like, if it feels good and you have all these butterflies and unicorns and you feel it, but a person's telling you up front, how do you deal with that? Because
walk away. I would walk away from that. Here's why. Let's say you applied for a job, mm-hmm. and you're kind of like, oh my God, I love this job. I've always wanted a job like this. And they tell you, here's what you're going to be doing. And you're like, yeah, these are tasks I love to do. I know how to do. And then they say, but just so you know, there's you can never be promoted. So you'll always be in this position, right? Uh-huh. And then you have a choice to make. Do I want to be promoted? Do I want to get paid more? Mm-hmm. Yes, I love the current role, but like, you have to think about the future if that's what you want, mm-hmm. right? I'm certainly not suggesting that like marriage is for everybody or like a long-term relationship. If that's not what you want, if you're really just like, look, I just want to have fun, meet some cool people, by all means, keep doing that. Mm-hmm. But if you're really thinking about your long-term, I don't like when women stay in a relationship for a really long time, mm-hmm. and then they're like forcing a guy into marriage, or like, when's the ring happening? And it's like, well, if he did tell you at the beginning of the relationship that marriage isn't something that he sees for himself, he told you. Right. So don't ignore people when they say what they want. Listen.
I always
don't ignore that.
Like, I guess that would be a tip. But I don't know if your tip, my tip is like, if you really want to get to know someone in the first, you know, whatever, months or weeks, just let them talk. Just mm-hmm. let them.
Oh, I just.
She's bumping into the mic. She got excited about that one. So it's, you just let them talk and just kind of, you know, feel them out, hear them out, and, you know, be open to just their thoughts and just not be like, oh, well, that person's going to be, well, he's an F-boy because he just like, no, just let them talk. Let them, you know, just put them.
You know what we
go
do
to our own grave.
That is really, we have to stop it. Like we have an inherent bias, right?
Right.
So when you meet somebody mm-hmm. and you like them, mm-hmm. most of the things that come out of their mouth to you are going to be positive and great when you just feel an initial vibe.
Okay.
When you don't, when you're just like, ugh, everything that comes out of their mouth then has this like negative, like, ugh. Like, I had a friend who...
Oh, my goodness. That's so funny.
This dude sent her flowers, mm-hmm. right? And this gorgeous bouquet of flowers mm-hmm. to her job. And she was so disgusted by it. She was just like, ugh, I can't believe, like, the nerve. Like, why would you send that to my job? Now it's causing all this attention. And she's, like, going on complaining about it. And I said, if this were a dude that I know you were feeling... Absolutely. We would be having that opposite conversation. You'd be like, girl, let me tell you what he did.
We're going to the whole wedding shop. We're picking out a dress. Right. You know, I'm a size 7 in a ring. Like, it's so true.
Yeah.
It's so true.
So watch for your own bias.
Watch for your own bias. So we have to put the tips down. We have watch for your own bias. Mm-hmm. Okay. We have listen.
Yep.
And what was the first
one? Know yourself and know what you want.
Know yourself and know what you want. Okay, so this goes into more of like the mental and the health, you know, aspects of things. Like, how does that process look like, getting to know yourself? And I think for me personally, people who are homebodies and loners, they say, oh, I'm getting to know myself. And I'm like, you actually aren't. You're actually just talking to yourself. And you're actually saying, I'm doing this because I need to learn me. And I'm like, but you don't have an outside perspective of the fact that you're selfish. You don't have an outside perspective of the fact that, like, you are short-tempered, or you're rude to people when you are around them, or you have social anxiety. You don't know that because you're just so busy being by yourself, you know? Mm-hmm. So are you really getting to know yourself if you are just completely looking in the mirror and saying, like, yeah, girl, you healthy. You looking good today. Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, what are your thoughts on really getting to know yourself?
I think it is good to spend time alone, mm-hmm. right? Especially if you're a person that is like needing other people's attention a lot. Mm-hmm, it's good to spend that time alone and be comfortable with yourself. Because a lot of people aren't. Like, a lot of people, when they're in the house alone, they're like, who can do this? Who can come out with me? What's going on? What's happening?
Oh, that's me. That's totally
me. And
me.
they sort of just are uncomfortable, like, spending time with themselves. Mm-hmm. Like, sit in that uncomfortable space and figure out why you don't like spending time with yourself. Mm-hmm. Now, I do agree with what you're saying is, like, how are other people viewing you? And how would you know that if you're just kind of alone, right?
Right.
One of the exercises that I have my clients do is send out a questionnaire to, like, 3 or 4 close friends and family members and ask, what do you think my best traits are? And what do you think I can improve about myself? And write them a little note, like, here's why I'm doing this.
Have you done this for yourself yet?
You know what's funny? I actually haven't. But I feel like my mother naturally gives me that feedback all the time. I don't even have to ask.
Jamaican mother, right?
Oh, so you won't. Yeah, there is no mystery with a Jamaican mother. You will know what is great about you because she will brag on you. And then you will also know what is not cool really quickly.
Gotcha.
Like, I've walked in the house before and she's like, yeah, I get fat. And I'm like, I'm going through a hard time at work. Like, you didn't have to say that. Yeah, I know I'm getting a little chunky.
I love that. Okay, so we've gotten the tips that you
would you do that? Like, would you send out an email to your friends and family? And what do you think they'd say?
See, I'm like overly social, and I love other people's opinions, like, because I love having these conversations. Like, this is just something I just have literally probably every hour on the hour.
Right.
Like, I just want to record a podcast and just let people share their feelings and tell them that they're great and they can do it, you know? So I would love it. I mean, I think it's more shock value when you find something you really don't know, because I think I'm so like, okay, I know I'm a little talkative. I know that I could be, you know, a big personality, or, you know, maybe I feel like I know a lot of things I can improve upon, but I think it'd be more shocking if you hear something that you're like,
I have no idea.
She's mad selfish. I'm like, I pride myself on being selfless, you know. But I do think it's really great to do. I would totally do it. I'm not afraid of it.
Yeah.
Because I think it's more important to come from people that, like, you really appreciate and love, to say, all right, she's, you know, she always talks over me and she never lets me talk. And my sisters would say that all the time. You know, you can turn a story about you constantly. And I'm like, no, I'm just trying to share my experience so you can get better and we can improve this. And then when I started hearing that, I'm like, oh, okay. And then there's just some friends that they just want you to listen. They don't really want your opinion. So it goes back to, like I said, downloading. You'll be hearing that throughout the whole show and the rest of the shows and the topics. Is really downloading your friends as well as the guys that you date, because there may be a friend who doesn't want your advice. You know, there's guys that I date who really don't like my opinion. And it's not, I mean, I think it's negative, but, like, if I'm a very fiery person. So I could be like, well, that's because you didn't ask me to do this, or you didn't invite me out to this. And they take it as a person who is going against the grain, or someone who is just being difficult. And I don't look at it like that. So I try not to be that way around that person. I know that I can't be in a long-term relationship with you. I know I can't have deep conversations with you. But I say, okay, they don't really like that part about me. So I like to profile and download people so then I can stick to a program a little bit more, because I know when I start being spicy that it's gonna cause some problems, you know?
You know what I started doing lately, and it's working?
Okay.
So particularly in my relationship, when we
get into it. Which we're going to go to next.
Well, when we get into it, I just say, well, how can I help you in this particular situation?
Okay.
And it almost is like, it diffuses.
First
it's
of all,
like,
he loves it. Because,
I'm not arguing
by the way,
with you.
He's one of my very close best friends. And it's so funny, but in the beginning, I know it was totally like, oh my gosh, you could just calm a person down. It's so great. But now has it changed since, it's been some time to like, you're trying to shut me up and not let me talk. Like, how is it from the beginning to now that you guys got some time in? Does it still work to do that?
Well, I've just recently started doing it.
Okay,
I think like relationships go through these like stages. In the beginning, of course, it's like, oh my God, you're the most amazing person on earth. I've never met a person like you. Let's just, oh my God, forever. God, Jesus, right? Yes. Thank you. And then, and then it gets to a point where it's like, you're really kind of getting on my nerves with some of the things you're doing.
Absolutely.
Right? And then it gets to a point of like, you're still doing those same things that I said are getting on my nerves. Right. Please stop doing those things. And then it gets to like, and then it's like arguments, right?
Right.
And I think like the next phase is learning how to do that constructively, because it's always going to be there. You're always going to do something that your partner doesn't like or doesn't agree with.
Okay.
That's never going to go away. So it's not like we're going to get to a place one day where it's like, oh, we agree on everything.
Absolutely.
And so it's like you have to learn how to argue and how to fight and like how not to like bring your partner down in that process. And that's, I think, the stage that we've just gotten through is learning how to do that. Because he's very much like, let's talk about this right now, and I'm like, no, I need time to like process and decompress.
So that and you have to meet in the middle.
Right. And if I'm angry, like it can't be constructive, because I will just say what is on my mind, and you don't always want that. Right.
Right. That's the jackpot right there.
Yeah.
Can you argue? Can you not bring that person down in an argument? Because this Sagittarius mouth, like, it is not for the faint of heart, And there's people who I know, like sensitive guys, when they're around me, I mean, just in a dating process, on a date, I can make you just feel so bad about yourself, because I think I'm just being honest and open, and we're just having a connection, and it's like, you should be so intrigued by my honesty. And they're like, she's so mean. Every time I'm around her, I feel like shit. And I'm like, bruh, come on. But it's about, I thought that was being fair. I thought that was being honest. I'm very big on fight with your honest emotions, so then get it all out, because I don't have regrets. I don't hold grudges. I sleep so clearly because I can just, okay, we've got through it. I told you how I felt. I was mad. I'm not mad anymore because I've already told you about it. So like when you have two people who are different in that sense, how do you meet in the middle?
It's not the what. So it's the how. So it's not me letting you know that I'm angry or mad or not letting you know. You should always let somebody know what you're feeling and what your emotions are and why something hurt you.
Okay.
But it's how you do it. So if I'm in a moment of rage and I'm like, you're just such an idiot because you do this like this and like that, like, yeah, I'm expressing my emotions, but it's not in a way that fosters any sort of change in behavior.
Right.
Because all it's doing in that moment is hurting that person, right? So if I say, look, and this is a little corny, but I think it's very true. But when I say, look, when you do that, it makes me feel like you don't care. It makes me feel like you're not listening to me.
Right.
And then like bring some actual, like a workable thing that person can do in place of that. So what I would like you to do instead is XYZ, but I think in a moment of rage, it's impossible to think that clearly.
It's pretty impossible.
It's impossible. So step away if you need to and say, look, I can't discuss this right now. I need some air. I need some space. And then like I can come back.
How does that work when the person is not that way? Like you're the opposites in that way.
Right.
Like, no, we need to argue. No, nope. I don't like, for me, I have triggers in arguments because I like to argue and I can argue. And I think that I argue fairly until I get to a point where then I get too hot. But my triggers are people who don't want to argue back with me and people who walk away from me. If you walk away from me and we haven't finished this out, then I shut down and now I want to like, I gotta go, or I just want to, flip the table like Love and Hip Hop, So I have my triggers, where, because I think that I have a PhD in arguing. I'm like, okay, let's do this, all right? How do you feel? But then if you know the triggers to make me get to the point, then I'm like, oh, this is.
But why does it have to happen right then and there?
Right.
Like, why does it? Like, what does it okay, if you're mad about something, it's because somebody did or said something that you didn't like or exhibited a behavior that you didn't feel was right.
Exhibited a behavior that
right?
you didn't like.
But the goal is to get them to change that thing that made you feel that way.
Okay.
But what is the difference, I guess? What does it do if you're arguing about it in that moment versus in an hour or two?
So, I mean, is that just a level of maturity? You know, because I feel like, you know, when we get back to knowing thyself, and I know in my, you know, 20s, and I would say, you know, I just was on fire. I want to argue. I want to flip. I want to put my hand in your face. And now I'm like, if I have to do that, I do not need to be in a relationship with you. And I'm a little bit more mature to say, all right. But it also goes to, once I've downloaded that person to say, like, you know, I don't want to hurt their feelings. Like, I'm going to say something probably mean or rude or do something, but I know that I want them in my life for a really long time. So let me not say anything that's going to actually damage that relationship. I'm going to fight and I'm going to argue a little bit more fair, opposed to a person that you're like, I don't give a hell if I never see you again. Then you're in danger territory because you've gotten that hot. And you may actually really like them, but you're like, you know what? I don't care if I see you again. And that's when things get a little...
I think we have to shift the mindset here.
Okay.
I think we can't even think about it like an argument.
Okay.
We have to come from it in a place of solving a problem. So there is a problem. What is the best way to solve this problem?
Okay.
And if the best way to solve this problem is walking away from this problem temporarily, well, that's what we need to do.
Okay.
But I think like sometimes when we think about it in an argument, it's almost like I need to win the argument.
Right now. I need to win right now.
But not solve the problem, right? And so like, yeah, you can win an argument just by like being louder, by like saying some stuff that knocks that person down,
funny,
by like getting them to shut up. You know what I'm saying? It's like a match where it's like, I just beat you down. Okay, but like, what's that solving?
Here's another question. Like, I remember being in a relationship with a guy who would let me win and be like, you're so right. Like, I know I win. And I would be like,
you're not even fighting for it.
No, I would feel so at ease. I would be like, thank you. You know, like you see that I'm the smarter person here. And then literally do the same ish over and over, you know, because
nothing was being solved. He just didn't want to argue. He was just like, I'm not arguing.
So right. You know, give you a hug. You felt like it was just love. And I'm like, yeah. Or do something way worse, and you're like, yeah, I know we spoke about that. I'm working on it. No, you're not. No, you're not, sir.
And that's what happens, I think, to a person who's just like, I just don't have the spirit for it. Like, I just don't have the heart to sit here and argue. Like, you'll just be like,
even be in a relationship.
You'll just be like, yep, cool, yep, you're right,
What about arguing when you have people who are just they're on the extreme opposites of arguing? I mean, there's never going to be people that can. Okay, we're both going to walk away.
Problem solving. On the extreme ends of problem solving.
Right. No. Is that your question here?
Yeah.
How do you solve problems? I throw tables like I'm in Love and Hip Hop. Or I like to call Dr. So-and-so and have us, I mean, I feel like that's it, when we get to the dating 101 on your first date, is it fair to be like, how do you argue?
Yeah, it is. Like, how do you problem solve? Like, what do you do when there's an issue in a relationship? And I also like to ask about previous relationships, right? So I'll say, what happened? Oh, you said you were in a relationship a year ago. Like, what happened there? How long were you guys together? Because that gives me hints as to who a person is. Some people say
they don't like to know that. They're like, well, it's me. I'm getting a fresh start. And I'm like, I think it's patterns.
I'm not saying you should necessarily use it to judge somebody in a harsh way. But like you can tell something about a person based on how they handle a situation.
Oh yeah.
Again, people can change, but like it does give a little bit of insight as to how this person like functions in a relationship.
Do you think it's a red flag when someone who just 50% of their exes they can't like have a conversation with? Or they're
100%.
Like, oh nah, we just weren't compatible.
I don't like that. Okay, I feel very strongly about this, right? I just think if you loved somebody, if this was true, like I love you, and it didn't work out.
Okay.
If you can just now flip the switch and turn to hate simply because you're no longer in that relationship, that is a warning sign for me. Anytime I hear a guy say, oh no, she was crazy, she did this, I can't talk to her anymore. Number one, you are taking no responsibility for anything that you did in the relationship. Right. Mm-hmm. Number two, how did your love go to hate so quickly?
How did it go so quickly? You know? But you see it more in marriages more than anything. You see and I'm like, y'all have kids and y'all can't talk. Oh my goodness, that I actually get like really sad about that. You know, for women, I think it's a little bit different. But like when I see a man who's like, I can't stand him, I'm like, you can't, what? And she got your kids?
Yeah, I don't, that's sad to me. I'm friends with most of my exes.
Right.
And it's because I realize why I love them. Mm-hmm. I realize why it couldn't work anymore or didn't work. Okay. And I've moved on. But like, I'm not, if I see them on the street today, it's all love. Like, let's go grab a drink. Like, I call them, we talk, like I know where they're at. They've been on my podcast. Mm-hmm. Like, right. So it's, I don't believe in just like dropping people simply because the status of the relationship has changed.
So as a dating coach, dating expert, you have a successful podcast. Can you be single and talk about like dating? You know?
Yeah. I was single for a very long time while I had my podcast.
But were you on the search for love or?
I was. Like, I went out on many a dates and that's why I could talk so openly about it because I was seeing what was out there and it was scary in some ways because I was like, what is happening to dating? Like, what is going on?
So with another point, and I'm a big believer on this too, is like go on many dates. You know, if you think you want to start dating or you want to settle down, like go on as many dates as possible. Don't sleep with everybody. Just go on a lot of different dates. Get a lot of personalities. So did you do that tactic?
I did.
Before? Okay.
I did. Mm-hmm. I really like went into it without a type. Like I was just totally like.
So you were throwing spaghetti on the wall.
I knew what I wanted, but I didn't want to place a type on that.
Okay,
so I knew
it was a man of no face.
Right. So I knew that, you know, I wanted a guy who was like family oriented and very loyal and like very honest and very open, but he could look many different ways.
Okay.
You know, so that part wasn't necessarily.
So when he qualifies,
because again, that's you got to recognize your own bias.
You do.
Because all of a sudden it's like, oh my God, this guy is 6'3". And other things stop mattering. Right. So I was just
seen his kids in the whole 6 months. And
right.
You're like, it's because he's busy. No, it's because he's a deadbeat.
He's
dad.
busy being 6'3".
Right.
So I recognize my own bias in that. Okay. Like if I think a guy is like very attractive, then it's like, well, other things may not matter. But I was like, no, it's not going to be about that. Like it's really going to be about like who this person is and how they make me feel.
How to make you feel. Okay. Yeah. So they have to have. So the two things were. They have to make you feel a certain way. You have to feel that feeling. And then also they have to have some of your, what do you say the qualifiers or profile or what? Or just some very simple qualities.
Okay. There's a couple.
Because qualifiers and qualities are kind of different. Like he has to be very successful, could be a qualification, or he has to be very family oriented. And if those, you know, if one is not there, right. Is that okay?
The big ones for me were having a relationship with their family because I had been on one too many dates where I heard a guy say, yeah, I don't talk to my dad. I don't talk to my mom. I don't. And
that's
to me,
red flag 101 for me.
And for me, I was like, I have such a close relationship with my family. And like, if you come into my fold, you're going to need to be very open to that and be a part of it. And if like, you just don't have that ability, that's something that can't work for me.
Do you think that people who have like messed up relationships with their family should be with other people who have messed up relationships with their family? Like,
no, you know what I think they should do? I think they should go to therapy and heal that. No, seriously.
Just go to therapy.
That's a big thing. I mean, I tell everybody that. Like, everybody should go to therapy. Like, don't think it's like, well, you know, I don't have any daddy or mommy issues, so I'm good. I think everybody has some sort of trauma that they walk around with. And then when you get into a relationship, it's going to come back up. It just is. There is no way it will stay buried. And so before getting in a relationship, like while you're dating, it's probably like if you're just going on dates, that's a good time to like be in therapy and like really like figure out like what are my triggers, what are my traumas, and how are they showing up in my life today and affecting what I'm doing now.
But also your therapist would be the first person to say, well, it seems like you're dating the same guy again, because if you come back the next week, if you're going like actively and saying, oh, well, you know, it seems like you like guys who, you know, are not successful, or you like guys who are overly successful and are emotionally unstable.
Right.
You know, they could start, you're not looking at it like that. You're like, no, I just like really nice finance guys and we have the best things, but they're like, no.
And the other thing is what you want versus what you're attracting. Because I hear like a lot of my clients will say, I just want a guy who's like very simple, very nice, very kind-hearted, very caring. And then they end up going out with guys that are just sort of about themselves and are just douchebags. And it's like, well, if this is what you want, why are you attracting that? Like, what are you putting out there that says, I like and want this type of energy? Because it is something that we're putting out there.
But then it goes back to the feel. And that's the problem. I think when we crack the code of having, the qualities and then that feel attached to it together, it's like, whew, yes. And then we have to go to the whole next phase of acceptance of rejection. Mm-hmm. And then it becomes like, it's like a formula at the end of the day.
Yeah.
So most of the times you go for, it just feels so good, but he's he ain't got it together, but I just feel so good about him versus he has it so together, but I just don't feel that good about him. So okay, now we've cracked the code. We've been on 100 dates and we finally find someone that has some decent qualities and it feels good. Okay. Now, so that's where you kind of went from what you were doing, just going on all these dates and just,
And actually, I met my boyfriend when I just sort of stopped.
That's what I remember.
Yeah, like, I didn't meet him on a date. I just had, at the point, he had basically slid into my DM at the point that I met him. And when he slid into
I was so there for this whole thing, which is hilarious. He's like, I'm going to slide into her DMs because she said on her profile that I'm like, that's not going to work.
Yeah, no, I had a profile on Tinder. And it was the type of profile I recommend nobody having if you're actually looking to date.
I remember.
But it was literally just like, I have a podcast about dating. And that was it. It was like an ad for my podcast. It said nothing. And then it also said, and also, let's meet. I don't like messaging back and forth on here. If you want to meet me, let's meet. Like, it was very like sort of hostile. But that's just the place I was at. I feel like I was just on a burnout and like, I was over
New York. You
didn't
want to meet people. And if you were like, if you want to meet me, this is where I'm at.
Right.
And I may just not be giving you any energy.
Right.
Okay, you okay with it?
Yeah.
Sure. And he was like, yeah.
So then he slid into my DM and then I literally said, sorry, I'm not dating.
Yes. I was there for that interaction too. I was like, she don't like you.
But yeah, he was consistent and considerate. And then here we are 2.5 years later.
Right. So you had all the qualities and I mean, but that wasn't really what you were looking for because he has kids and he has all these things and you were like, you didn't want a guy with kids at first, right?
We joke about the fact that I wrote him into my life, right?
Oh, and I like, I take all the credit because I'm just obnoxious like that. He was dating a bunch of people and I said, you need a person to have these qualities, to look like this, to have this type of social ability about them, but still be a homebody. And he always would say, I just want someone where I can just give them a task and they can just do it. And then you are literally like the person who's like, I'm in control of this task and it just worked. I mean, you guys are literally made for each other. It's just hilarious, But you wrote him into your life, and I was writing.
You were writing me into his life as well.
I wanted to be brown skin with curly hair, like everything.
No, I wrote a letter one night to the universe that was basically like congratulating myself on having met this amazing guy. And I got the idea because this girl...
So you were doing The Secret, okay.
This girl came on my podcast and she told me, she was like, yeah, so right before I met my boyfriend. And she said, this always stuck with me. And she said the letter I wrote was for the first time, not about the 6-pack, the 6 foot, or the 6-figure. It was really about what I wanted this person to make me feel. Mm-hmm. And it was almost like I went home that night and I like wrote it and I didn't even... It was like, have you ever felt like you were writing or doing something and you weren't doing it? Like, it was just like my hands.
The outer body experience.
Yeah, no, right? Like my hands were on the keyboard and then I just wrote it, emailed it to myself, and then I didn't think about it again.
Okay.
But it was really focused on how a person would make me feel and like stupid things like they're going to laugh at the fact that you love Drake so much. You guys are just going to spend all your time. Like, so it was weird and random things like that. And so when we finally did get to know each other in like a deeper way, he started saying a lot of these things that were like in my letter. And I was like, did he hack my email? Like, how did he know that?
Email, right.
And so that.
Has he ever seen this letter is the better question.
Yeah, he's seen it now. I read it to him that night. Was
he crying? Or you guys,
he was like, that's exactly how I feel. And then the next day I was like, we go together. And he's like, we've been going together. And then that was the end of that. Like, it was
we go together.
No, I'm not controlling it all, but just so you know, we go together now. I'm telling you.
I tell everyone we go together, and they're like, no. We go together. No, we don't. No.
I didn't agree to that.
I love that.
Yeah.
How long has it been now?
2.5 years.
Shoot.
Yeah.
I've been on 1 year in my head, and it's 2.5 years.
Yeah. No, time it flew crazy fast.
That's great.
Yeah.
I love that. So you took some of your own advice?
Yeah. And I had to, like you said, get rid of some of my own biases because, one of the first things he told me when I met him was that he had kids.
Right.
And so immediately when he told me that, I was like, okay, seems like he'd be a really great friend. Like, that was my immediate reaction.
But here's the thing. Here's the thing that's hilarious. You wanted someone to be family oriented, but you wanted a man to have no kids. And now, you're like the best person to these kids. Like, they listen to you. They love you. They go by your rules. And now the little one, she's just the boss in training. Like, me and her have a whole beef. Like, every time we see each other, we square up. But she's like a little mini version of you. It's hilarious.
She's like my bestie. We get each other on a mental level. Like, we have like stare downs, but then we always come back together.
And her, I live for the stare down with this little. She's so cute, but it's just so funny because you probably never imagined like.
Never. I never imagined like, playing a stepmom role
right.
And I'm not going to lie, like it has its challenges and it's hard sometimes, but they've taught me so much and like they've shown me like more about who I am in good ways and in bad ways, you know? And like I needed that. And it was so funny the other day. I hadn't seen them in a while. I've been like moving around a lot. There's been a lot of moving things happening lately. And so I hadn't seen them in a while. And then I saw them and hung out with them for the weekend. And I just like, it brought my soul so much. Like I didn't even realize, like I seriously was like, didn't even realize like how much I miss them and like how much like joy it would give me.
Oh my God.
And
don't cry. I
have eyeliner on
sometimes with my nieces,
yeah, like
kids will bring you back to reality.
Oh my God. Yeah. And so then when they left, like I just got really sad and I was just like,
I think I called you guys and you were like saying, I was like, I'm sad. The kids are leaving.
Yeah. And then so like I texted their mom and I was just like, I just want to say thank you because like,
oh my goodness,
they're so amazing. And I didn't realize how much I needed them. And that thank you was really like a thank you to her because like she created these people, you know what I mean? And without her, they wouldn't be these people that they are. And I don't think I often think about it in that way. And it like hit me that day where I was like, this is like because of her. I mean, and him. But it was
why it's important to have relationships with people that you have kids with.
Right. So yeah, it's been great and not something I expected. Not something I wanted going in, but something that I'm glad I have now.
Oh, wow. That was a whole word, but they are pretty amazing kids.
Yeah.
I can imagine.
Thank God.
That. Yeah, no, they're pretty amazing and they're beautiful on top of that and they're just good. But they are like such a reflection of him and her.
Right.
And, you know, I have dated people with children and it was very challenging, and it probably was a reflection of the person I was dating, but I didn't see it, you know? So when you see these badass kids or you see these kids who, don't have any home training or whatever, sometimes it is just a reflection of, that
because
person.
Your daddy's like this.
Right, because your daddy's trash. Just kidding. Just kidding. So what's next for the podcast?
I am right now on season 3.
Okay.
And always looking for guests with interesting stories. So if any of you out there have an interesting dating story or lesson that you'd like to share, would love to hear your story. Coaching here in New York and abroad. So I don't just have clients here in New York, but all over the US. So please, if you have any questions about dating, about anything from profiles to just what you should be looking for to getting to know yourself better, please reach out.
All right. So what we didn't say, do you think you can really find love in New York City right now? I mean, I think we're in an interesting climate, I would say.
I do think so.
Okay.
I do think so. I think the number one key is 100% being your authentic self.
Oh,
right?
Amen. Hallelujah. Mm-hmm.
You don't show up as the person you think you should be.
Right.
Because somebody will then fall in love with the you that you think you should be,
and then
not
you're gonna
the
have
you
a total
that you are.
argument,
right?
like the first time they see who you are.
Yeah, be 100% yourself. Be upfront about your needs and compliment people when they're giving you those things, and don't be afraid to correct them when they're not.
Okay. Woo, that's a good one. And just to dive into your podcast just really quickly, give me like some of the wildest stories that you've probably had. I mean, I've listened to it, and I know I've been helped bring some guests on the show.
Yes.
And what would you say is like your most memorable show?
Favorite one of this season, and probably overall, is the girl that you introduced me to, who came on and talked about her open relationship. One, I just think she's like the most mature person that
absolutely
that I've probably ever met, and I like enjoy her spirit for that reason. Like she's just evolved in my mind. I'm like, she's not focused on the petty at all, and she's just like thinking bigger picture. But yeah, her and her fiance were in I believe they've been together now for like 6 years or so, but for about half their relationship they've been open, and now they both have other partners. Yeah, so I think they've each been seeing their respective partners for like over a year. And so that takes a lot of like courage. It takes a lot of guts. It takes a lot of understanding. Like it takes a lot of letting go of the things that you think are the key elements of a relationship, right?
Okay.
I think what we think is what makes a relationship in most people's mind, it's like, that's my boyfriend. That's my husband. That's my daughter. That's my. And her perspective on it is like, we don't own anybody. I don't own you because, I'm your girlfriend. You don't own him because he's your boyfriend. Like, there's no ownership here. Like, we choose to be where we are with who we choose to be there with. And so you don't have to own people for that. People are free to love other people.
Okay.
And like,
not if you date me. However, just kidding.
No, I love, and
it makes sense.
And I love that perspective, and I've thought about it a lot since she came on. Just the idea of the ownership that we have over people, and just even the terms we use and how we perpetuate that and how we treat them. You know, you're my. Why did you look at that girl? You're my boyfriend. Like we almost like take the humanness out of people because now they're ours. Like, now that you're mine, I'm going to put you in this box and I'm going to make these rules around who you need to be because now you're mine.
But it's also even more rules being in an open relationship. I mean, there's a ton of rules that you guys have to have. It's not just running amok and just being like, oh, I went on a date. You have to have like some
I'm
severe
sure,
rules.
From what she said, it takes a lot of trust and a lot of honesty. You have to trust that this person is doing what is in the bounds of whatever you guys have decided. Like it takes that trust and it takes that communication. And yeah, but I loved her perspective. My other favorite episode is, so I had, right before I met Chris, I had traveled a bunch and took a break from the podcast and just like cleared my mind. I was like I said, I was at a point, my Tinder profile was like, I'm not here to, I have a podcast.
Jade. It's funny. That was one of the questions I forgot to ask, but yeah, you got to the jade. I mean, I think that's
got
part
to
of the
a place
breakthrough.
where, I was jaded with dating. I was jaded with New York. I was jaded with my career at the time. And I just was like, I'm going away. I'm booking flights and I'm going away.
That happens in that this is what this topic is about. Like, the nitty gritty of dating in this city is like, that's a phase that you probably will go through, and you have to get over it in order to get back out there and have a fresh start.
Yeah. And so I just, I left for a while, and then, that's when I met Chris, actually, like right before I left. And
yeah, you knew who you were.
But anyway, my point was,
you got it. You got together. Okay, cool.
My point was, my favorite episode is when I came back and just talked about why I had left and like the lessons I learned. And then Chris came on and, just sort of like we shared our story, and we were still very new at that point, but shared our story. And
but you guys were in a relationship.
We were in a relationship.
That was the first kickoff.
Yeah. I've had some really like great people on. Like, I feel like I learned so much from my guests.
Bet.
just hearing, because you'll hear people say something and it's like you're guilty of it. Like people will be like, and I was just so controlling and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, and then what'd you do, girl? Like,
okay, can you just quickly dive into like the 21-day rule that you guys have?
Yes.
It is the most amazing thing ever. Please explain this.
So early on in the relationship, like Chris and I were like, I think bickering about something, and he said, you know, because like, you remember what I said earlier when I said, and don't be afraid to call people on when they're not doing the things that you think they need to do.
Right.
So I'm a very frequent, like, if you do something right now I'll tell you. But if you do something 2 minutes from now I don't like, I will also tell you. And so, especially being new in a relationship, I felt like that was important just to like be very vocal, right? And so he did something. I don't even remember what it was. And I was just like, I don't really like that because the way that makes me feel is, and he was like, you can't.
I just want to be a fly in the wall. You know, babe, thanks. He looks like, you know what? That makes me feel a little uncomfortable and I'm triggered.
And he's like, I bet you can't go like 21 days without bringing something up. And I was like, yeah, of course I can. And he was like, no, you can't. And so initially it almost started as like you can't basically keep your mouth shut for 21 days. And then it evolved into, okay, if we can as a couple, like basically work through our stuff enough to make it 21 days without arguing about something, let's get married.
But you guys call it incidents, right? It's called the incident, right?
It's called days without incident. So
it's on the wall in the house. It is the funniest thing ever because I see it go from like 18 to back to 0.
Oh yeah. So we've got, so every day that we don't have what we deem as an incident, an incident is anything that will cause more than like a 20-minute interruption in our day, right? So it's never like, why didn't you do those dishes? Like that's not really even an incident. But if it's something that like, it's like, well, we have to like now sit down and talk about this or like we're arguing about this, like that's an incident. And so we've been at like 20 before. And then it's like something happens and we go right back down to 0. And so it took us a good year and a half, believe it or not. And we had to be very honest with ourselves because there were some times where we'd be like at 18 and I'd be like, I'm so mad right now. I don't want to bring up that, but you know what? Like, and then we go right back down to 0. But we've made it past the 21 days. So we're now marriage eligible.
So that was the whole thing. It was 21 days without incident, arguing fairly, you know, being able to get through, you know, this constructive, criticism without, you know, causing these huge, you know.
And it taught us so much.
Oh, I can imagine.
I mean, because we realized we were arguing about like the same 3 things all the time. So it was after a while, we like ran out of new arguments. It was just going back to like these 2 or 3 core things that we just couldn't come to agreement on.
Okay.
And to be honest, like 2 of those things are still really like, okay, I don't necessarily agree with you, but I think now being so aware of them that like it doesn't cause as much of an issue. Do we still agree? No. Okay. But we understand like you have your point of view, I have mine, and we don't need to delve into that every single day.
So, I mean, I highly recommend this. I don't know if you recommend this, but it sounds like, you know, a 21 days without incident in order for you to be eligible for marriage. Like that is, I think everyone should do that, you know, because people don't play fair. When crisis hits, how are you going to react? Like that is important. Oh, I mean, the qualities, the feel, like we got past that. Whew, which that's the hard part, you know, but now we have to learn how to interact with one another. And, you know, we're born with different DNA.
Yeah.
And we're just not going to agree with everything. So how do you play fairly? And I think my most successful relationships is that we knew how to argue. We never wanted to get to a point where, like, I would never say anything to make you feel less of a man, less of a person, or just hurt your feelings. Right. I can say, like, shut the fuck up. But, like, you actually knew that's how I talk. Right. I wasn't you weren't calling me a bitch. I wasn't calling you a bitch. You know, we were just like, that's some bitch ass move. But then there's people who are so are you calling me a bitch? You calling it no.
It's not like
not
that.
like that, but they have to understand that about you. You know, so I love this 21 days. You guys gonna write a book about this, huh?
Yes, we are. I'm not gonna say the title yet, but
okay.
it'll be out. It'll be out soon. What's this 2019? Let's say middle of 2020.
Okay.
We'll make that the goal.
Manifestation.
Yes, middle of 2020.
So let's go into, you know, at the end of every show, I'm going to go into, you know, how you feel about your career, how you feel about your relationships, how you feel about your overall health, your mental, how you feeling. Do you have a cold? Do you feel like depressed, whatever? So today we're going to do Kanye faces. I don't have the Kanye faces, but whatever. Maybe we'll put them in the screen. So let's go into your career. What Kanye face would you give yourself for that?
What's the happy one?
The happy one? Okay. Good.
I recently left a job that really was not fulfilling to me in a lot of ways. So really, as of about a week ago, I'm like,
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's so good. And let's go into, since the relationships are last with you, let's go into your overall mental and your health. What are you doing to really take care of your mental, your mind, your body?
So my body, nothing right now. No,
it looks great, by the way. You walked in, I was like, yes. Oh my gosh.
No, there is something about New York, I will say, that makes it hard to have a balanced lifestyle in that way. You know what I mean? Like, there's always something going on here. You know,
you're always moving.
You're
so
always
you can
moving.
actually just going to the train station. I'm like, man, I had to have burned 500 calories just going up those staircases.
For me, it's just always like, yeah, I'll plan to cook a meal at home, but then somebody's like, oh, I'm having this thing, come out. And then I come out, and then, so it's just, I find it being back here a little bit harder to maintain sort of a healthy physical lifestyle. I think I just need to like get back into my rhythm. So I'd probably be on like the Kanye face in that one. Mentally, I feel good. Like I said, I recently just had a shift in career, and when that wasn't right, it felt like all of these things weren't right.
It's the trifecta.
It felt
That's
like
what
they
this
just
show is
weren't.
about.
And so now that is in line, I feel good on most fronts.
And your relationship.
I feel really great about that.
I'm about to say, you
that's the happy
on
Kanye.
record, you better be.
That's the happy Kanye
I
face.
feel great. I hate him.
You know what's funny? Do you remember on Sex and the City, they would always say,
I love Sex and the City.
In New York, you'll never have a job and an apartment and a man you like at the same time.
It's the trifecta.
And it's so, I find that to be so true. Like in New York, it's like, the thing I don't like right now is like my apartment. Like,
I truly believe that. I also say like, the apartment, the job, guy,
like you, and I'm just like, I just want to get to the place where all three.
That's where you feel like you're like an adult. I think that's where you feel like I'm an adult. But I use this trifecta because I'm like, okay, no matter what, if you're not really feeling good about yourself, you could be in this great relationship and a guy could be pouring into you and saying how amazing, how beautiful you are.
Right.
But if you do not feel that way about yourself, you're going to have some challenges.
Yep.
Or you may be so insecure, like, why is he talking to me? Why is he, So, you got to balance these things out. So that's good. Yay!
Yeah, so I feel good.
So where can we find you?
Yes, I am on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook at Tennesha Wood, TenneshaWood. And you can also catch my podcast, DRLpodcast.com. So I'm always looking for new guests. And if you'd possibly like to be a client, email me as well. So yeah, that's me.
Yay. Well, thanks for tuning in to the Music Men in My Mental podcast. So excited to have you. Thank you. Make sure you like, subscribe, follow me, follow the podcast. And we're just balancing this shit out one day at a time.